Greetings, and thank you for joining the Capstone Group for this important Zoom event. Before we get to our main presentation, a bit about the Capstone Group. We were founded in August of 2018, inspired by the Howard University student protests that took place earlier that year. We are a dynamic collaborative of Howard University alumni, faculty, students, staff, and community that proactively address issues relevant to the Howard University community. We provide an empowering platform to exchange ideas and experiences to affect positive change. Now, sit back and enjoy the presentation, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tonight's guest, Reverend Wendy Hamilton. Let's learn a little bit about her background. We're so glad. Yeah, clap it up. That's right, Cyclone. Thank you for coming out. So not only is she an HU alumna, but Wendy is an ordained minister. She is a social justice advocate. She is a mother of one, originally from Portsmouth, Ohio. She has a bachelor's degree in human development, and she attained that degree in 1991 from Howard University. She has a master's in religious studies from Howard University School of Divinity, and she obtained that in 2006. She credits her educational experience and single motherhood as being two of the most transformative experiences in her life. Wendy is also an adjunct professor of communications at the University of Phoenix and the Community College of Baltimore County. She is the former executive assistant to Ben Jealous, former president and CEO of the NAACP at the headquarters in Baltimore. She's participated in initiatives on criminal justice reform, civic engagement, economic inequality, and environmental justice. She has dealt with the educational, human services, and nonprofit sectors, giving advocacy, also dealing in communications and chaplaincy. So Wendy is very diverse and extremely talented. She has served as a part-time pastor of the Open Door Metropolitan Community Church in Germantown, Maryland. She served as director of spiritual and cultural outreach for 2020 presidential candidate Andrew Yang. We will talk about that. She is currently running as a delegate for Congress for DC for 2022. Put your hands together for Miss Reverend Wendy Hamilton.
Thank you so much. That was that was a lot. Thank you. Every time I hear my bio read, I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that. You get a little older and you just do these things and you live life and you're not even thinking about them, in the context of this is shaping who you are. This is a part, you're going to be a part of your legacy and become a part of your biography. So thank you for that, Maria. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, can you start at the beginning? We're so happy to have you. Tell us about growing up in Portsmouth, Ohio. I mean, it's a small town. Was it diverse? Did you go to integrated schools? Your family life,
Well, first and foremost, let me say thank you to everyone who's on the call tonight. I wouldn't be sitting here today if it weren't for Howard University, and we'll certainly mention that in the talk here. And I appreciate you in particular, Maria, my big sister, who I joined Tau Beta Sigma sorority with. Thank you for this gracious invitation to be here tonight. And I'm really excited that the young people are on here as well, hoping that they will become eventual Howardites. But I love young people, so thank you to the interns for being here as well. Now, you asked, is Portsmouth, is it a small town? Does it sound like it? Yeah. Okay. Some people, have heard of Portsmouth, Virginia, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire. But I am from Portsmouth, Ohio, which is at the southern tip of the state, just south of Columbus. So just to help locate people, if you know where Columbus is in the center of the state, just go about 90 miles south and you'll stumble across Portsmouth. And it was a small town. Some folks called it Mayberry, in a sense that it kind of had this idyllic setting where everybody knew everybody and everybody got along, and everybody was, 2 or 3 persons away from being connected by marriage and such. So it generally was a good upbringing for me. I see you're showing a picture there. That's my mother and my brother and myself at his high school graduation. He's my only sibling. But yeah, Portsmouth was cool. It was integrated in theory, but as you can see, there's my middle school basketball team. There were only a couple of people of color, myself and my friend Nora there, number 10, that were a part of the team, but we all kind of got along. We went along to get along. So I can't really say anything bad about my experiences in Portsmouth, just in terms of building community. But I also can't pretend that there weren't issues that maybe I just didn't notice as much as a young person growing up there. Now, I will say that the only direct sort of racist experience that I had was in the 4th grade. I was actually going to a Catholic school at the time there in the city. And I was always very communicative. And so I was raising my hand, and my 4th grade teacher, who was a nun, by the way, would never call on me. And I couldn't understand why she would not call on me, because she could clearly see my hand raised when she was asking questions. So one day I went over to her and I said, Sister Orlet, I said, you never call on me. I said, I always have my hand up. And she looked at me and she said, I don't call on you because niggers couldn't possibly know the answers to the questions that I'm asking.
Wow.
At 9 or 10 years, I didn't even know what to do with that, right? I mean, I had heard the word. I knew that it was bad. I had had some experiences, but I was not prepared for that to happen. And all I did was I was kind of in shock. I went back to my chair and I just started softly crying. But I didn't want to cry in front of her. I didn't want to see that she got to me. Right. And I got outside. My mother picked me up from school that day. She could immediately see that something was wrong on my face. Mm-hmm. And that's when I broke down. She said, what happened? I said, she called me I didn't even get it out of my mouth before all I saw was the back of my mama's coat, the door of the car open. I said, oh Lord, she's going to tear the school up. That's
right, Mama.
I'm running behind her. She's going in. I want to see the principal. I want to see the nun. I want to see the priest. She wanted to talk to everybody. And they were like, calm down. What's happening? Explain to them what had happened. And he said, he profusely apologized. He said the nun would be dealt with. We had 2 4th grade classes. So they switched me to the next 4th grade class the next day. And for the remainder of the year, I think the nun ultimately got reassigned, to another parish. But I always look back on that because in that moment, when we got back out to the car, my mother was instrumental in saying to me and shaping how I processed that. She said, listen, that was her ignorance. That was not yours. You are, who God created you to be. You're not going to let no ignorant white woman, in her words, dictate to you who you are. So you just, get yourself together. It was not okay. We're going to take care of that. But she is not going to determine who you are going to be or who you are going to become. Kind of one of those pep talks. But I look back on it, years later and saw how that one defining moment kind of shaped my vision, moving forward, just in terms of the reality of the world, experiences that I was going to encounter and how to best process them. So I credit my mom.
I was going to say, because that was one of my questions, like, where did you get this like firm tenacity? And y'all are going to learn about Wendy as we go along with this conversation. And Dr. Sonia Smith, you could be my timekeeper so that we don't get out of control with the conversation, with the time. So that shapes you because all of these different points where I've met you and come to know you, whether it be school or, you know, your pastoring, you've been just firmly rooted in your truth. Like, no, I want to do this. So that's very interesting. I see where, you know, that was very important, because that moment could have broken you down and shattered your spirit.
Right.
But your mom did not let that happen.
She did not. And she was fierce about that. And she was, you know, God rest her soul, she was someone who, as a Black woman, was elevated to high levels of city government. She became the deputy auditor of our small town. And so she, you know, was well respected in the town as well. And she earned that because she got that job straight out of high school. She started out, you know, she graduated high school 17 years old and became a secretary, you know, they called them at the time, there at the city, and worked her way up to become deputy auditor. And so she faced a lot, you know, in her ascent. And so she was determined to make sure that her children, myself and my brother, were prepared. So she took on so that we wouldn't have to take on the things that she did. And she taught us the lessons that she learned in those moments. And she was always very strong and always very rooted in who she was and where she stood. So I credit her for that.
Great role model. Great role model. That's a blessing. So now, how did you get to Howard? How did you get there? Why did you choose Howard? And we'll talk a little bit about your Howard experience.
So you asked me that a little bit the other day, and I told you Howard chose me. I firmly believe that, in a sense that growing up in that small town, and growing up even in other states, and in Ohio in particular, they were more geared toward encouraging you to stay within the state and go to school. Like, go to Ohio State, you know, go to OU. You don't need to go out into one of those big bad cities where there's, you know, bad things that could happen. So they really kind of discouraged us from looking outward to select colleges. And there really was not much discussion at all about HBCUs. I mean, I didn't know much about Black college. Now, we have one in Ohio, Central State and Wilberforce, but those were never presented to us as options to consider. And so it wasn't until I had a conversation with a Black guidance counselor, actually at the high school level, on another grade level, where we were starting to talk about colleges. And she said, well, have you thought about an HBCU? And honestly, I said, well, what's that? I mean, I didn't know the concept. And she said, well, these are, you know, historically Black colleges that are, you know, designed to shape you and mold you, you know, in the image of the African-American woman that you're becoming. And so I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I will say the one reference I had for historically Black colleges was the Ebony magazine that came out every year with the Black homecoming queens. Now I'm dating myself, but we did get Ebony and Jet, and I oftentimes looked forward to that particular issue, because for me, opening up a centerfold magazine and seeing all of these Black queens, like, that was something I had never seen. And I'm reading the schools, Lemoyne Owen and Howard and Meharry, and I was like, wow, that was like a dream to me, because I couldn't even envision something like that in this small town that I was in. So that's how I sort of knew a little bit about Black colleges. So I went to my mother and I said, Mama, I think I want to go to an HBCU for college. And she said, oh, what? And I told her, you know, what I would like to do and what the HBCU was. And she said, listen, you know, I don't fly. So wherever you decide to go, it's got to be someplace I can get to you by car in case there's an emergency, which makes sense. I had heard of Florida A&M because of their band and Grambling. And she said Florida and Louisiana was too far. I had also heard of Morehouse because of Dr. King and Spelman. She said, you're getting closer, but Atlanta is still a little far for the ride. So I said, well, what about Howard? Because I had seen a lot about the Howard, you know, pictures in the Ebony. And I said, what about her? She said, where is it? I said, Washington, DC. She said, how far is that a drive? I said, 6 hours. She said, go to that one. I said, okay.
Wow.
Apply to that one. I said, all right. So I applied to Howard. I got accepted. I had no idea what was in store. I came to Howard sight unseen. I didn't do no campus tour. We hadn't been to the city or anything. I just was so happy I had gotten this scholarship and I was going to Howard. I did not know what to expect. So you can imagine when my mama and daddy and brother brought me up here in the car, we're driving along trying to find Howard's campus, and we're looking for some great big green expansive campus.
Right.
We're looking for, the grass and the things. And we came across 14th Street, got lost, and it was like, and we pulled over and brother was like, oh, you can go hook a right up here on Georgia Avenue. And then if you go straight up the hill, it's going to come up on your right-hand side. You're going to see.
That was pretty shocking from coming from Portsmouth, Ohio I had the same experience. I started crying like as we were driving down Florida Avenue, like
really?
All of the burnout buildings and stuff. I said, this can't be Howard. Mm-hmm. So what you get to Howard,
yeah,
you join the marching band, you become a member of my sorority, before you got it, Tau Beta Sigma, right? And I remember you being online. You joined Zeta Phi Beta. Yes. Tell us how this Howard experience changed your life.
Girl, when I got to Howard, after I got settled in, after my parents got over their shock, and after we found off-campus housing because my housing application got lost, but that's a whole nother Howard conversation. Once we got settled in on campus, it was on for me. I was like, what? I'm here by myself and I ain't got no curfew and I don't have to ask my parents. So I was living life, particularly that first semester. My GPA didn't do very well. I was a little bit lost because I was all over the place and didn't have a lot of self-discipline. And so I went home that Christmas break and my GPA was like a 1.9 or something like that. And my mama said, oh, is this what we're doing in DC? Oh, is this what we're doing in Howard? Well, I tell you what, you don't get those grades together. You're going to come back. I'm going to send you back for this last semester. If you don't pick it up, then you got to come back home and go to community college or whatever, which was fine. But I did not want to come back because I knew I loved DC. I knew that I was on to something. So what happened was I joined the band. As you can see right there, I was a trombone player, T-Bone Express. I had not seen a Black college band live until I came to Howard. And I had been in band since the 5th grade, concert band, marching band, and all of that. And when I graduated high school, I said, I'm done with band. I'm finished. I'm just going to go enjoy myself. And I got to Howard and saw Showtime out there dancing and, busting a move on the, I called my mom. I was like, send my horn, send my trombone. And she literally put my trombone on a Greyhound and shipped it to me. And I joined the band. But it was in joining the band and Tau Beta Sigma, I needed to be rooted, Maria. I needed to find my tribe. I needed to find the accountability. Once I found a group to be connected with, to keep an eye on me, that transformed me in an instant. That's me online with Zeta. As you mentioned, Tau Beta Sigma, I pledged in fall 88. And then I went on to pledge Zeta Phi Beta in spring 90. I also wanted sisters. I was the oldest of 2, and I had a younger brother. And so I wanted to know what it was like to have sisters. And, so I went to these organizations and feeling like if I can find a group that I can be accountable to and that I can bond with, I think this will expand my experience at Howard. And it certainly did, because now you're in the band. Now you've got to organize your time, right? You got to do study time because you're going to have practice. You got to travel. You have section leader practice after. So it located me in a place where now I could get the ultimate Howard experience, and is the reason why here me and you are 30 years later after having met, still in relationship with one another. That's what the Howard experience does. And you don't even know it. So I didn't know what I was coming into. I went home and I told my mama, I said, I'm so proud to be Black. She said, okay, now wait a minute, Sister Soldier, hold on now. I was like, but I felt like I had not seen this many professional, beautiful, Black people in one spot in all of my life. So I got on campus and felt like I'm so behind. I want to learn everything. And so I was there when Black Nia Force took over the A building. I was sitting, I was like, yes, let's go, And Peter Jennings and ABC News came and we was on television. I think my mama might have saw me on TV. She said, excuse me, are you skipping class to be? I was like, Mom, we got to be down for the call. So Howard transformed me. And so, I got stories upon stories, but that's really what it brought me to my Black self. It validated that aspect of my life that I did not even know was missing. And so I just immersed myself in the Howard community, in the Howard experience. And I am so grateful that I did.
Yeah. I mean, everyone who's ever, A building problems aside, it's just informed our lives so richly. And you said sisterhood. You mentioned anchoring. I was in the marching. I was in T Phi M, so that was the discipline. And I'm sure, when I think of you, when we'll talk about the school in a minute, I'm sure some of your discipline training that you received in marching band came into play when you were when you were a teacher at Brooklyn Middle School, and now attendance counselor. So, so many purposes. So, what else did you do at Howard? You had very rich and exciting educational career, but you also added some personal additions to your life.
So if you are referring to the ministry aspect and my daughter and all of that, yes, you're absolutely right. I did, upon graduation, have a daughter, a relationship that didn't work out, but produced a beautiful daughter. I actually was 6 months pregnant at my graduation out there on the yard. So I told her, you've already graduated from Howard. With me. And it was during the raising of her, because my mother passed away right around the time that I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter. So there were a lot of life changes: graduation, losing my mother, becoming a single parent. Suddenly, I was a little lost and I was a little empty, and I was really beginning to search for, some more meaning in my life and some more stability. And so I started, going to church more and exploring my spirituality and looking for support in that regard. And that's what ultimately led me eventually to explore ministry. I never felt a call in particular to ministry, but I just know that during that time when all of these life changes were happening and I was looking for something to fill a void that I had, that I wanted to go to church. I had cousins, and religion was always around my family, and I felt like God could provide that comfort. So I did, and got involved, and it really just became sort of a personal mission for me. I started working on the Hill for a little while and was going to a Bible study there, and the chaplain of the Senate there, Barry Black, he's actually still the chaplain now. He's the one who kind of pulled me to the side, and he said, Sister Hamilton, I think there's more for you than just a seeker of knowledge. I think you actually have a call that you might want to explore. And he ultimately wrote a recommendation for me to go to Howard School of Divinity. So I went back as a single mother. My daughter came to some of those classes with me as well, and graduated seminary, went into chaplaincy. And so, all of these things, though, came about as a graduate of Howard University who opened herself up to the fullness of what the Howard experience communicated to me.
That's incredible. And, I think that I knew that you were a chaplain, but I really came to observe you in the pastor role when Margot, our dear friend, bandmate, and soror, Margot Owens, when she passed, and you helped to eulogize her at the Tau Beta Sigma event on campus. And not only were you uplifting, comforting, but you understand, you have a knack for humor, like the gift of humor, and how to use it to heal. And so I was just sitting there like, wow, because we felt it was just a healing moment, and it was beautiful to see you in that role. And I said, this girl is really, really blessed and gifted in so many ways.
Well, thank you for that. I model myself in terms of ministry. I like to say, I I'm the I follow the Jesus that flips over tables and calls people out. You understand that revolutionary Jesus, the one. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the one that I model myself after. And so, if I was going to do this faith thing, if I was going to follow this call, I had to do it from an authentic place. So, can I get up and do the these and the thous and the those, and I can do all of that, but at the same time, that's not my style. My style is, I need to break it down to a practical level so that I can understand how this ministry gift can be applicable to myself and to everyday life. I didn't necessarily feel called to be a pastor, but I certainly felt called to be a pastoral counselor. I've always been good with the one-on-one. So that's really where the chaplaincy piece started to come in. And when I got out of divinity school, I pursued chaplaincy. And I was working as a hospital chaplain. I've walked families, to the darkest places. I've counseled, I've sat at bedsides with people as they've transitioned from this light to the other side. And I've rejoiced with people. I've done weddings, I've done funerals, but I've always done them in my authentic voice that I believe that God gave me to speak in. And so I'm always going to keep it real. That's how I relate to God. I'm not, Lord, thou art one, like, Lord, what's really going on? I need you to help me with this. This is a tough thing. I need you to help me process this, understand this, and break it down so that I can, and it still be holy and sacred, right? I teach a tangible gospel. I teach, a tangible faith that folks can massage and apply to their everyday lives and still feel like they're connected to God. And Howard Divinity School gave me the permission to do that.
That's excellent. And I think that's what's needed in the world today. We have so many different kinds of people. We can't assume, everyone's kind of the holy roller, thee, thou, though. People need real life Jesus, world examples. And that brings me to my next kind of question or, topic. Yep. Another place that I met you, well, again, was at Brooklyn Middle School. And let me just give this some context for the listeners out there. Okay. So my daughter took a break from Catholic school to try out a brand new school in the neighborhood called Brooklyn Middle School. Okay. And Brooklyn Middle School turned out, the first year they were beautiful building, but really questionable leadership that really couldn't handle the demographic. And when I say it was a tough environment, I'm telling y'all, there were children swinging from the light fixtures and doing all kinds of just everything. It was unbelievable, like something out of Lean on Me, seriously. But in walks Reverend Wendy Hamilton. And I'm like, girl, what are you doing here? And she's like, I work here now. And, I'm like, wow, thank God. Good. My daughter will have some place to turn to, some balm in Gilead when everything starts, during this crazy environment. But when I tell y'all that Wendy, seeing her interact with the kids, with the students, was an incredible experience. She would look into their eyes and would honor them with honor their humanity. And these folks could be having their pants down below their knees and just, all of that. She didn't let that deter her. She gave them their honor, their love. She talked to them as if, she was looking in the mirror, and she commanded a certain respect. She gave them love and they gave it back to her. And that's your tenacity. That's your character. How did you do it? And you're still there at Brooklyn, and you have been responsible for a positive turnaround, because that school has done a 360 or 180, if you will. I mean, it's
Yeah.
totally different. Tell me about
Well,
that.
well, let me say that, I was a substitute teacher. So I came along there, and this was, during a period of coming out of divinity school and preaching and chaplaincy, but that doesn't always pay the bills, right? So I had to find some additional income. And with my education and human development background, I was invited to work as a substitute teacher. Oh, look at my babies. As a substitute teacher in DC public schools, and was assigned to Brookland Middle School. And at that time, brand new, like you said, $68 million state-of-the-art building in Ward 5. They wanted a standalone middle school there. And so I was brought in as a substitute teacher to cover for a teacher who had just started that year and got hurt, I think, in the classroom and was away. And so they wanted me to, to cover the class temporarily. And over the course of a few months, it was determined the teacher was not going to be returning. So they named me as the permanent sub for that class for the remainder of that school year. And so with supports from other teachers, I kind of took on that class. And yes, you are absolutely right. And let me first say, I love DC. I love DCPS. That's why I love seeing these babies that are on here now. But what I have learned is that this is ministry too. Ministry doesn't just take place in this right here. This ministry. This is the grassroots
ministry. Yeah.
This is where you take what you preaching and all them pretty words, and you get the opportunity to put them into practice right in here. And so, I've always endeavored to be that mother, even in raising my daughter, teaching her to be able to feel comfortable around me and talk with me and interact with me. And so I tried to cultivate that for her, because I didn't have that necessarily growing up. I love my mother, and she is a role model of mine, but she struggled with some addiction, alcohol addiction and things like that. And so I was determined through therapy and through prayer and work to give my daughter a different experience growing up in terms of empowering her and appreciating and embracing her humanity. And in doing that, it prepped me for these younger middle school children who will take you there. Yeah. And that's all I will say, will take you all the way there. And honestly, not to sound cliche-ish, I just try to look at them the way God would look at them, because he created them too. And I just let them know I care about you, because most of the children in that developmental age, and of course, working in this school, I start to pull on some of my human development training. Thank you very much, Dr. LaPointe. I refer back to what I learned and what I was trained on in undergrad to meet these children at the developmental stages that they're in, and speak to that and who they are and their families. And so I just looked at it, Maria, and looked at them as a different congregation with a different set of needs, and tried to authentically address it. But the one thing that I committed to doing was treating them and validating their experience. So often they get dismissed, they get pushed aside because, well, they're just kids. Well, what do you know? Your voice doesn't matter. I don't want to hear it. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, they actually do. And, we as adults may not always agree with what they're saying or agree with their perspective, but they have every right to be heard. And I think because of my pastoral nature, and, I'm trained to listen compassionately and authentically, the kids were drawn to that. I feel like many of them got the sense that they could trust me because they could. I feel like many of them, there's that nurturing mother piece of me. And so I've had plenty of them come in. If I got to give you a hug, I got to give you a hug. That's just what I'm going to do. Now, sometimes that would get me in trouble because, we're not supposed to necessarily get too connected to the kids, because you get connected and then they move on. And they go on to high school and things like that. And then, because we struggle with some things here in DC, and particularly with crime and that, I lost a couple of students, a couple of students were murdered, and it was very, very difficult. Matter of fact, I just did a prayer vigil for one of my 8th graders from 2015 who got killed back on Valentine's Day of this year. But I still was connected with that family because her brother still goes to Brooklyn. And so I finished out substitute teaching that year, But then they wanted me to stay on in a counseling capacity because they saw that was my strength and that was my area. And so they created this attendance counselor position where now I work with families who struggle with their students coming to school regularly, truancy and chronic absence, and overcoming those obstacles. So you might have a family who is unfortunately in a domestic violence situation where they've had to go and move to a shelter. And so that child hasn't been to school for 4 or 5 days. And I've got to follow up and find out what's going on and help and counsel them and get them the resources that they need. So again, it's ministry. It's just in a school setting and not in a pulpit.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We need that. And please keep up the awesome, awesome work. You're saving lives, seriously. Now, tell us about your ascent into politics and how, you know, we have about 4 more minutes before we open up the floor for questions, but we want to talk about are those two paths connected? The pulpit and politics. How did you become Andrew Yang's person that the counselor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how did
spiritual outreach director? Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Well, in a nutshell, politics and faith, you know, and religion are not mutually exclusive if you look at it through a social justice lens, right? Because that's what Jesus was advocating for. He was advocating for the poor and the widow and the least of these and the voiceless. And so from a social justice and through a social justice lens, ministry fits right in there. And so I found myself, even while I was in ministry, establishing social justice, you know, departments or avenues or projects or initiatives like, hey, the work is not just behind the pulpit, it's out there in the marketplace too. We need to be getting out there and talking and touching the lives of people. We sometimes get in church and we build it and think if we build it, they're going to come. But Jesus never went to church. Okay, not going to preach that right now. But if you read the text properly, Jesus was gathering folks on the beach. You know, he was meeting people at their kitchen table. What he was not doing was sitting in a church expecting people to come hear him. And so for me, I feel like that's where we then need to be taking the messages too. And if you connect with politicians who have similar messaging, then I feel like that the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. And so when I get myself involved in politics, and it pretty much started when I was working with Ben Jealous. I see me, Andrew, and Dave Chappelle. That's a whole nother story. But when I started working at NAACP, you know, as Ben Jealous's assistant, you know, I was right there with him and got to work on. That was around the time when Trayvon Martin got shot, and Troy Davis, the death penalty case was happening, and so I got to be on the backside of what was happening and seeing how, you know, faith could play a role in that. And then if you look back in history at civil rights movements and all, you know, Martin Luther King was a preacher. Lots of those planning meetings, where did they take place? In the basements of churches. You know, when they were organizing what they were going to do, what their next steps were going to be. So the church used to be knee deep in social justice. Not sure what's happening now, but we used to be at the forefront of these movements and these conversations. And I think there's room for us to get re-involved in that. But that aside, that's where my introduction and my interest in politics from a social justice standpoint came to be. And so as the presidential election was forming in 2020, I was looking at the candidates. I was really still kind of dealing with PTSD from 2016, like the rest of us, trying to figure out how in the world we got here. Yeah. I happened to see an article in the New York Times about this young Asian gentleman who had just announced, you know, his candidacy for the presidency. And he was talking about how automation had taken jobs away and how people were suffering and they needed a lifeline. He started talking about universal basic income and how we need to give people $1,000 a month to get them through until we figured out how to get these jobs replaced. But anyway, what he was talking about resonated with me. I said, that sounds like the thing I preach on Sundays. We got to take care of people. We're losing people. You know, we're forgetting about the least of these and stuff like that. So I explored him. I reached out because I support people politically that I can connect with spiritually. And I connected with his message. I reached out to the campaign. I sent an email, said, hey, I'm here in DC. Would love to learn more about you. They came to DC maybe about 6 months later. We met up. They invited me to come, to a couple of rallies, and I introduced them. And, from there, we formed a friendship, formed a connection, and they invited me to be a part of his staff. And essentially what I did as his spiritual and cultural outreach director is to take the elements of his message that were spiritual and share them with faith communities. Because for so long, the Republicans and the right have kind of held religion hostage and held the faith message hostage and narrowed it down to particular issue. But faith is so much broader than abortion and gay marriage. So that, the Christian left, I like to say, is what I represent. And I think there's room now, people are being more receptive to the message of the Christian left that talks about poverty and inequality and racial justice and voting rights and DC statehood and all those things. So that's the voice I wanted to be and was for him, and now am endeavoring to do myself.
Yeah, that's incredible, Wendy. You're bold and you go down paths that other people don't go down. And I really, really admire you for that.
Thank you.
So now you decided to run, and you are currently campaigning for Democratic delegate for the 2022 elections.
Yes,
this is a huge thing. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of money. And you're facing a well-known incumbent. This woman is well-loved, and she's been, I looked it up, 15 terms. That's
30 years.
That's mind-boggling to me. What are you hoping that your run for this position will do for the community?
Ultimately, and let me say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is, an icon. She is my elder. I've been raised right. You will not hear me in my campaign say anything negative about her at all. What I say is I'm not running against Eleanor Holmes Norton. I am running for DC. And so with that being said, my idea is representing and giving the folks of DC a voice that is reflective of what the needs are on the ground and what I'm hearing every day and what I want for DC. And really what moved me was a lot of politicians and a lot of media outlets, when they talk about Washington, they'll say on the television, Washington is full of crime and it's corrupt and all, and they lump us, the 700,000 residents who are here trying to live and thrive, in with what's happening over on Capitol Hill. And that's not always the case. Don't lump us in. Don't say we're all corrupt. We have rights. We're paying taxes without representation. You need to give DC our respect. I like to think of it, there's like a Washington and then there's a DC. And so I want to run to be the voice for DC. I want us to be able to speak up on the Hill and let them know what our concerns are, what our priorities are. I love this city. I've been here since I was 17 years old when I came to Howard, and I've had this experience and this connection that I feel like I want them to know when the DC delegation walks up, on the stage, DC is in the house. So yes, I'm pro statehood. I want us to, to become the 51st state. But I also recognize that beyond statehood, there are issues to fight for that are going to be just as important when we do achieve statehood. So a lot of my message is, yes, statehood, but statehood and beyond. What are some other things we want to see in DC when we become a state? I believe you don't wait till you get something to prepare to have it. I believe you prepare and have your message and have your expectations ready so that when you get what it is you're fighting for, you're ready to be at the table and to talk about it. So my policies around universal basic income and criminal justice reform and affordable health care and education, all of those things, of course, are on my website. But I want to get DC residents and mostly back engaged in the process, because when I look at the numbers, when my team looked and broke it down in terms of turnout, DC is checked out in many regards. The 2020 election was great because everybody was fired up. They wanted Trump out, right? So great turnout. But if you look at the midterm election before that, turnout in DC was about 18%. That, out of nearly 500,000 people here in this city, only 89,000 people voted. That's low. I mean, you get low turnout on midterms anyway, because there's not a presidential race, but that's really low. So that made me start to think, why are people not engaged? Why are people not coming out? They're registered, but something's not resonating. Something's not inspiring. Something is not getting people out the door and to the polls. What is that? Because if you're going to be a representative, you want to be in tune with your people and find out, why are they disengaged and why are they disillusioned? So I'm spending my time for this next year talking to the residents of DC and finding out what it is that they need in order for them to get re-engaged in the political process and the political climate here in Washington, DC, because we can be a force. And if we become a state, we're going to have a few more voices at the table than the ones that are there now. So that's my goal, is to re-inspire and re-engage DC voters.
I think you're doing that now. And the incredible thing about, you making this run against such a huge incumbent like Eleanor Holmes Norton is that you are making inroads, just as you say you want to, just by engaging in the process and going about it. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, they talk about it, but by you engaging in this process and putting your energy and love and time into it, you're achieving those goals. We want to open up the floor for, so you can engage with the folks on the call. We see, I see like Clarence Labor.
Oh, hi, Clarence.
Hey, David G. Charles Clark. Okay, so
what? I love my band family.
They all out here supporting you, girl.
That's right, I'm here.
We're going to open it up for some questions or some comments, but I want everybody to put your hands together, unmute yourself right now and put your hands together for Reverend Wendy Hamilton and all her joy and all her love and all her, her energy and her.
Let's go.
Woo-hoo. That's how we do things. We HU.
S.
What's up, fam?
Capstone is not used to the whole band vibe. Okay, so get ready, Capstone family, because the band is here. Okay.
I love it.
Yes.
So Dr. Reverend Wendy Hamilton, this is Clarence Labor.
I know that voice. I just stood at attention.
Yes, attention.
I just stood at attention.
Right. Like we needed to know, like he needed an introduction.
So I want to commend you on your success, and I also want to say that I was so moved and pleasantly surprised that when I went to my daughter's middle school years ago, she's now at St. John's, running track and doing well in school. But you were at Hyde Addison Middle School, and I was like, kind of like Maria, like, what is she doing? What are you doing here? And you were there as a force, a mentor, tutor for the kids, and it warmed my heart. So I just want to say thank you for what you're doing and what you've accomplished. And, come to Howard at 17 like I did. I was lost for maybe more than a semester, a year, but I got myself together, right? We all do. And we find our cause, we find our journey. And you going into the ministry, my dad found the ministry at 50 plus, right? Wow. So we all, you never know what's, there for you. But anyway, thank you very much. I just wanted to, add that to this conversation. And I'm very, very impressed, and, good luck with the politics as well. And I'll touch bases with you offline to talk about the youth and the lost youth, because there's some things that I do, but this is not my forum, so I can tell you offline of what I do in the city as well. Okay.
I'd love to, Clarence. Thank you so much. And thank you for your influence. Yes, Clarence Labor was my drum major and he was a top-notch. He could all, for the interns, if you've ever seen Howard, the drum majors, and they have the staff, whatever that rod, what's that called?
Baton.
The mace.
And Clarence would take that baton and flip it, and he'd bend all the way back and touch, but he's just a stand-up person. And thank you so much for the influence you've had in my life, Clarence. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I second and echo all of that. And I'm sure as does Catherine. And Chuck Clark is on the line, and he's another influencer of us and
Yeah.
responsible for the way we are, which is phenomenal.
I'm humbled by those statements because, you know, how Clarence said, you know, it took me. I'm still trying to get myself together. You know, Clarence said, but you know, this has been a really rough year, and this webcast has been like a ray of sunshine. I'm so enriched by just your journey and how you you know, you've told your story. A lot of us could you know, align with it because we've had similar experiences, but how you've just taken it beyond that, and now, you know, you're pursuing this effort, and we fully support you. We love you. We really want you to be successful at this, and you know, you definitely have our support. And you know, I have nothing, you know, other than to say, you know, I'm just inside to my core, I'm just so enriched by, you know, all of your efforts and what you're doing.
Well, let me say, you've always been supportive of me, Chuck. You know that you have. And if anybody who's been to Howard College, you know that sometimes you got to find different housing and things like that when they close the dorm or summertime and things like that. And Chuck housed me at you know, a crucial point. He had
housed everybody.
Yeah, pretty much everybody had a room in their house.
The whole band was in the house. Even Kamala Harris was in the house at one point. So
everybody.
At the same time we were, at the same time, me and Sonia and them, when we were pledging. That's right.
Yes. And I remember that. Matter of fact, I was living at your home in the home that you rented out to. He had rooms. Wasn't just me. Like you said, everybody had rented rooms from Chuck. And it was around the time that my mother had actually passed away. And so I just remember distinctly sitting there in the living room and you and others just coming through to comfort me and things like that. You may not remember that, but that was 1991. And I was just, you know, you all kept me, you know, during that moment. And I appreciate that. And let me also say something else about my run for Congress. Do I want to win? Absolutely. But I also want you all to know that it's bigger than just winning, right? My goal is to get folks re-engaged in the political process and taking back their power within this process. I think for so long, people have just become disengaged because they feel like my voice doesn't matter or anything that I say is not going to make a difference. I want to remind people that it does. And if I win, great. But if I get more turnout, if I get more people re-engaged, if I get DC residents taking another more active role in their destiny in this city, that's a win for me as well. So I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about what you're doing. And I just want to make a disclaimer. This is not a campaign event for Wendy, you know, or anybody else. This is the story of a Howardite and how she came to Howard and her journey in public service. That's what we're doing. We're talking about your public service, your life. You have given it to the community, the people around you, and you need to be uplifted for that. So that's what this is. And if you want to learn more about Wendy, we're going to put and what she's doing, we're going to put her information in the chat. You know, please check it out. But we still have time for more questions, comments from the floor, please.
Reverend Dr. Bison, my name's David, and I'm just curious, since you've worked in the school system for so long, do you have any particular feelings about Michelle Rhee and her tenure with the school, with DC?
Well, I came in shortly after her tenure, you know, so I came in during what some might consider the Rhee fallout, if you will, where teachers were still becoming used to the impact. You know, I think that was pretty much the legacy that she left behind was the creation of the impact system, which would, you know, measure teachers' performance and all of that. So I can't say that I was involved in the school system during that time, but I know that there was a lot of hurt. I know that there was a lot of support. There was a lot of mixed confusion. So in addition to me coming in and sort of being a resource for students, I also made myself available to staff and still continue to do that. As they navigated, this sort of new approach to teaching. So I didn't take a position one way or the other. You kind of get the opportunity to do that as in ministry, where you just kind of try to be the non-judgmental, safe space person that folks can come and share their feelings about a particular issue. And that's how I pretty much tried to position myself as far as that's concerned. Does that answer your question?
It does. I wasn't sure exactly when you came in during her tenure or after her tenure or whatever. And I've never actually spoken to somebody who worked in the school department or school system about her. I had my own personal feelings about her, but
they're mixed across the board. And I've had people come in and share their feelings on either side of the issue and what they feel like the legacy is. But as I said, more I came in on the fallout piece and people getting used to the new system and what was left behind and how they were going to navigate that new normal for the school system.
Well, Maria had to step away for a second, but we have two questions from Saquon in the chat.
Sure.
And the first one is, I don't know if you can see the chat, Reverend Wendy, but it's how do you balance everything that you have on your plate? Mm-hmm. And two, what are some of the things you do and can share for self-care? He says, I know when things are moving at a fast pace in life, sometimes we forget to take time out for ourselves.
Thank you for that. You kind of answered the first question with the second, because the first thing I was going to say is, how do I balance everything? Self-care. I am adamant and I'm very protective of self-care and self-care practices. So whether that is setting aside time in the morning, for prayer or for meditation, it's for being able to say no. It's for not putting too many things on my plate. It's not, having too high expectations of what I'm able to accomplish, but just being in the moment and trusting that I can do as much as I can. And when I'm not able to do any more, feeling comfortable with stopping, not beating myself up with guilt or feeling like I have to push myself to some beyond some unrealistic expectation. So I am fiercely protective of whatever free time, that I can get. It's not a lot, but it's quality. It's quality versus quantity. So I may only, get 30 minutes in the morning, but you best believe it's going to be completely, quiet and meditative and substantive. And again, making sure that I say no, because in a pastoral role, people can sometimes think that you're supposed to be accessible 24 hours a day. And sometimes you have to be, particularly if you're pastoring a congregation and something happens in the middle of the night, you may get that call. But at the same time, as a pastor, you also have to recognize that you don't have to always be the one to answer every call. Perhaps you need to delegate that to someone on staff or a volunteer or something like that, not feeling like you have to take everything on yourself. And then traveling. Let me just say that I have started to incorporate travel. Well, that was pre-pandemic. Let's be clear. I started trying to, so even if I go down to, I like to go down to Rehoboth Beach down in Delaware. It's only a couple of hours away, but I will set aside a day and I will definitely, go down to Rehoboth and just sit by the water. The water restores me in a way that nothing can. So if I just have to take a day and clear my calendar and go do that, that's what I'll do. But I make sure, and I listen to myself, I listen to my body, but I mostly listen to my spirit. And if I get the sense that things are out of balance, then I got to step away and I got to go recalibrate. So I do that.
Thank you, Saquon and Sonia, for stepping in. I think we have time for like one more question, maybe.
I have one.
There's another question in the chat box from Claudette.
There's another question. Oh, yes. Claudette says, have you heard of the platform to help women seek elected office?
I have, and I'm connected with them, with Emerge America. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Anyone else? Miss Boxell, how you doing?
Hey.
This is my other band sister.
I am awesome. I'm hanging in there. I don't have a question. I was working and Maria gave a nudge, and I said, okay, let me jump on. I didn't even go put any errands on or anything. I just jumped on the Zoom.
But that's how we do though.
I know, because I love Wendy. You know, I've acknowledged Wendy and her gifts quite some time ago. I never formally said this, but she is our official Showtime chaplain.
Pretty much.
If you noticed. And so, I've noticed Wendy as a leader, even back when she was in school. And so, while I don't live in the District of Columbia, I am excited for you and am here to help you in any way that I possibly can, because I think you have something that can really bring some added value to the table. Not just with campaign, what's the word? Your campaign
platform.
Yes, thank you. Not just with your campaign platform, but with your energy and your personality and your other gifts that you can bring to the table. So thank you for answering the call, and I look forward to amazing things for you and the community.
Well, I really am grateful for you, Catherine, of course, as my big sister and being one of the first, people that I connected with when I got myself together at Howard. But I also, when I say I love DC, I love the experience that I've had here, but I feel like my work in the school system has sort of enmeshed me in the community in maybe a way that other people who live here haven't. Working in DC public school systems, introduces you to the deep culture within the city itself, and you meet the students and you meet their families, and you have to learn what resources are available or not available, and you have to meet different agencies, and you've got to learn a little bit of slang. The kids like me because I give what they give. They come in, they think they're gonna joan on me. I'm joan right back. We just gonna joan together till you go sit down, because you recognize that I'm older than you and you don't want this smoke. So I will I love having these connections with them, and that's why I feel like, even though I'm not a DC native, I feel like one in so many ways because of the connection I've been able to build, especially through working in the schools for these last, gosh, I guess it's been about 7 years now, or 8 years that I've been with these babies and their families on the middle school level. And, that's a special developmental age anyway. So they're going through a little bit of everything. So I didn't counsel them through everything that they come in with and talk about. And I've gone to their dances and camping with them and chaperones on trips and cried with their parents and all of that. So I have a special love in my heart for the District of Columbia, and particularly for the young people too.
Well, wonderful, Wendy. And it takes a special person and a true Howardite to get into the community and to do work that we've been trained and educated to do, and
yes.
To give back in that way. And that's, what the founders of Howard and some of the luminaries of Howard, they want us to do. That's what we've been called to do. So you are doing that work. You are really doing that work. And we're going to go to Claudette Johnson-Berry right now.
Thank you, Dr. Reverend Hamilton, your passion definitely is outstanding and appreciated. Having transplanted myself from New York to DC and now living in Maryland, I understand exactly the culture shock that you've experienced in moving from the Midwest into Washington, DC. I remember my dad saying, "You're never allowed to get off that campus, period. Can't step into the community, can't do anything." It took till graduation for him to find out that I lived in Meridian Hill the whole time. So
I lived in Meridian too.
But one of the concerns I have in that we came to Washington at a time where it was still considered somewhat of a chocolate city. The whole complexion and the dynamics and economics of the city have changed dramatically. Housing around Howard is now north of $1 million.
Yes.
And the people who are residing in the community are not the people who look like you or I.
Correct.
So how are you intending to bridge that gap? Because there has been a displacement of the native Washingtonians and the average person who can afford to live in Washington, D.C. So
Yes.
how are you planning to cross that divide?
Fighting tooth and nail, you're absolutely right. I think the time I came to Howard back in 1986, I think it was probably about 72% Black and other made up the other 28%. With this last census, I believe we're at 46 now. So DC is 46% Black, 46% white, and then 8% other. And so as you might imagine, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of conversation around what to do. And even when we talk about the statehood conversation, people are feeling like part of statehood is a move to kind of finally push out what little culture of Black DC remains. And so what I'm fighting for, what I'm hoping and engaging in conversation around housing is maintaining and creating affordable housing, because what's happening is you're getting a lot of, not to get too political, but you get a lot of lip service about, well, we're redeveloping, we're tearing things down, but when we build it up, we're going to put a percentage of it and make it affordable housing. But your definition of affordable and what residents can actually afford is on opposite sides, opposite ends of the spectrum. So how can we revisit what we are defining as affordable housing? And let's engage the residents. This is another issue where decisions are being made without inviting the community. Now, I'm not saying they don't have open hearings, but sometimes, just like with church, sometimes you got to take the message to the people. You can't just sit back and expect them to come and say, well, we hosted a hearing and nobody showed up, so I guess that must mean they're okay with the decisions that we're making. No, you have to go to people where they are, and you have to talk to them, and you have to invite their concerns to the table and factor them into the decisions that are being made. And I just don't see enough of that happening. I feel like that's why the residents are becoming frustrated and disengaged, because they're saying, hey, what you're saying is affordable is not affordable for me, but you're not giving me the opportunity, or it doesn't feel like you are taking me seriously, because you're saying, okay, but then you're moving ahead. You're not making any changes based on what you're hearing. So it's going to have to be dialogue, but it's going to have to be honest dialogue. And it needs to be taking place in the places where people are being most effective, and most impacted, I should say. So come over here. I live in Ward 8, east of the river. Come over here and talk to the people I'm talking to every day and hear what they have to say and hear why they feel so distraught and upset, because they feel like their feelings are being ignored. So I hope to be a facilitator. That's part of what I do, bring people to the table and try to see where we can find common ground so that folks aren't continuing to feel like they're getting pushed out, forced out of their home, forced out of their neighborhoods, and not able to have a voice in their future.
And Wendy, one other piece of this is the employment. Black folks are not employed in the city. You see it walking down the street, down K Street. If you, I'm in a comfortable group here, so I'll just say it. My husband and I, as I used to drive into DC to go to work from Maryland, we'd have a game. How many Black people do you see on the street? And when you walk in the building, how many do you see in the building? That's not the janitor. That's not the security person. How many are you seeing in the office? Actually, in a work setting, they don't exist. Well,
and again, please visit my website. But like I said, I don't want to make this too political. But there's a couple of policies, that are related to that very fact for me. One certainly being implementing a universal basic income so that people can have some measure of income. Sometimes people aren't employed for very different reasons. They can't, they don't have the money to get gas, to go to interviews and, things like that. So we have to address the economic injustices and inequalities in the city, but then also the educational ones as well. I'm very much for restoring vocational training and career development opportunities and options so that people can go into trades and be trained and things like that. So I think it's a multifaceted issue when you look at it. And there's multiple ways to begin to address some of that. And so that's kind of what my position is as well. So I hear you, and my policies are such that I hope to address some of those very glaring things that we see, disparities here in the district.
Well, we're looking forward to this run, and folks who, like she said, please go to Reverend Wendy's website. They are listed in the chat to learn more, to find out how you can help, how you can be a part of, eliminating the inequalities and inequities in this community, in the United States, and really all over the world. So we want to thank you again, Reverend Wendy Hamilton, for coming on and taking your time and energy. And what would Jesus do? Jesus would be like, Wendy Hamilton. That's what
wait a minute.
Okay, seriously.
Don't bring Jesus in there, but maybe he would. But thank you all so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attention. Really appreciate you all. God bless you. And blessings to the young people who were on. Thank you for staying and hanging out for the whole time. And hope to see you all again soon, Maria. Thank you, HU Band family. I love y'all. Thank you.
Well, that's it for our event. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to become a member of the Capstone Group or make a donation to our scholarship fund, click on the link below. Take good care and enjoy.